So I wrote nanocrystals. It will be larger than this. We will see different, yes, it works, different sizes. So first, to remind very quickly, I am working for a long time on pickering emulsions. So this means that for emulsion that are made of oil and water, it is not surfactant that are going at the interface, but colloidal particles. And this is the definition of the pickering emulsions. And what is specific to such types of emulsion is that you see here that you have the size of the particle, and here the detachment energy. And when you have very small, like surfactant molecules, you have energy that is very low, which means that it goes and go back from the surface, the interface. So you have to put a lot to compensate when it is desorbed from the interface to always be able to protect the interface. But when you increase the size of the molecule or particle, then you increase considerably the detachment energy, and then it is absorbed irreversibly, which means that you have ultra stable emulsions. So this is not so old in our research, but finally it is not recent as a name because Mr. Pickering wrote it in a book in 1907. So this is a very old story that came back again from far to be renewed now. And since that, it has been shown that you can use a lot of different types of particles to stabilize such emulsions. So with different size, different shapes, and and notably you can use cellulose. So I've been, for my part, studying a lot the CNC at the interface because it's a very strange particle, quite difficult but very interesting. How it works on longer particles like NFC, and we can ask if any biomass is indeed possible to stabilize such emulsions. So first, we can see the influence of the size and aspect ratio. So I will compare the cotton and NFC. So the smallest one, the tempo for now. So I want to explain. I guess everybody is well aware of these small nanorods as cotton CNC. So about 150 nanometers long, and compared to NFC that are several micrometers long. So you know that an emulsion is the stabilization of two non-miscible phases. So you have the organic phase and the aqueous phase. And in the aqueous phase, we have the cellulose. And when you use ultrasonic process, then you have nice emulsions that are ultra stable. I am used to use ultrasonic device, but it can be many other types of mixing. And then you have very nice emulsions. So when you increase the amount of particles, you increase the volume of the emulsified liquid. And you see that whatever CNC or NFC, you can, in both types, have very, very nice emulsions that can be stable over years even. I have very old ones that are still present in their tube and they don't move. So when you look at the droplet size, you see that it's not exactly the same profile when you're using the short CNC and the long NFC. So this is the drop diameter against the concentration. So first, we are going to see how it goes with the CNC, the shorter one. So first, when you make ultrasonication, you make very small droplets that are not very covered because you have very few particles, and then they will coalesce until they are sufficiently protected on the surface. So it is the amount of particles that gives the diameter. This is called the limited coalescence domain. Then if you increase the amount of particles, you have more and more particles, and then you can decrease the drop size. And after a while, you see that the drop size doesn't move anymore, whereas you add some particles. And we showed that it is not because the particles are not going to the interface anymore, but it is because you increase the density on the surface, and then you change the protection. Now we can compare with NFC. So it is the same when you do an ultrasonic device. You have very small droplets that will coalesce until they are sufficiently stabilized. Then if you increase the concentration, we see that the drop diameter is increasing. And this is due to a connection between the droplets. Indeed, the length of the chain is longer than the diameter, so you will start to make some grapes. And then if you continue, you will decrease the drop diameter, but still make a lot of big clusters. So we could check all this by SEM, and we could see that for CNC, we have indeed individual droplets, whereas with longer NFC, we have interconnected droplets. So on the surface, we can see the nicely aligned CNCs, whereas for NFC, we cannot see that because it is all aggregated. So we can expect a lot of difference in these systems, and notably mechanical differences. So if you look at the rheological measurements, you can see that here, so you have the G prime elastic moduli, which is above, and here the G double prime. So you can see that both are very different. They both show a gel-like behavior. So the G prime is with a slope that tends to zero, showing that it's really gel-like. And also you have more or less a decade between G prime and G double prime. So we really have a gel-like behavior, but CNC is much softer compared to the NFC tempo that is interconnected. Then you have more elasticity. And for dynamic frequency sweep up to deformation, you can see that here again, you have the difference in G prime. So you go down and then you go back below, and here it's the same. We divided this in the first part, which is elastic deformation, which means that you can deform and come back. It is reversible. And above in domain 2, it is a plastic deformation, so it is irreversibly deformed, and it will break. The interactions will break. And what you can see is that this domain is after for the CNC, so you can have higher resistance to deformation with CNC. and both are reversible on a domain, but tempo will start to be degraded earlier compared to CNC. So which means that you will have a very different viscoelastic and then mechanical properties. And according to what you want to do, you have to choose what kind of particle you will choose. So it can be much or less long, it can be more or less elastic. And concerning CNCs, it will be individual droplets. And concerning a longer one, it will make some interactions and the clusters. So for the moment, we can look at CNC immersion and what can we do with these unique droplets, individual ones. So we decided to see how deep we could go down in size. So using higher energy, here is a high pressure homogenizer. And the starting point is around 5 micron diameter. So this is what we had with sonigation after the stabilization. So this is the starting point. And after several passes in homogenizer, you see that we went down to 300 nanometers, sorry, and a very stable nano emulsion. So this gives other questions because you know that the particles, the CNC particles are around 150, 200 nanometers. And if you have a droplet that is about the size of the particle, how will it work? Is it like a net, or is it adopting the round shape? So it was really questionable. And we saw that there was some work from people from CERMAV who showed that according to certain orientation of the nanocrystal, you could reach an angle of 60% without destroying the crystal. It was reversible, just when it is one orientation of the crystal, because if you're using other plans, then it is disrupted very fast. So, okay, we thought that it could be the hydrophobic plan that was aligned along the droplet. Then it can work, that you can have reversible bending. And this is what we could see by looking at microscopy images. So here is a droplet of about 150 nanometer in diameter, and you see that the nanocrystal is well aligned along the surface. So this is due to capillary energy that help and force the nanocrystal to bend. And you can see everywhere that it is really the case that the nanocrystal can easily bend along the surface. So you can play with the way you cover the surface, the way you change the diameter, so you can do quite a lot with the droplets. Now let's see with the longer one, the NFC tempo emulsions. So I remember that I remind you that it's making clusters and it's really a gel-like structure. You can have really very nice emulsions, and increasing the amount of nanoparticles, then you increase the volume. And can we use that for aerogels? So we did exactly the same and freeze-dried. And you can see that we recover exactly the emulsion as you prepared it, and that the porosity of your aerogel is directed by the drop diameter, and they are precisely recovered. So we used this aerogel to follow first the density. So you can see that it is a very high porosity and very homogeneous porosity. So it's really a very nice aerogel structure. And in these aerogels, you have three levels of porosity. First, the one due to honeycomb structure due to ice, because you have to freeze your sample. So you make this porosity with hexadecan droplets. You have the size of the droplets that makes the pore that are closed. And you have what is due to the pore wall. It is a 2D sheet like morphology. So we could see by the BGH approach that you have a diameter pore sized between 20 and 100 nanometer. So this is not a bad structure since it is very homogeneous. You see that by uniaxial compression, you have very nice mechanical properties with such aerogel. And we decided to see if we could use it as a thermal transfer in this aerogel for thermal conductivity. So there are three contributions. Conduction that can be the conduction in the solid phase. So due to here in red to the particles, the conduction in the gas phase, and you have the part of the radiation, which is electromechanical. So we did such experiment that you may know about thermal insulating properties with the sample in the middle and heat and see how the heat is transferred. And the results were very surprising since you have here the thermal conductivity of free air, and what we observed was all below, which means that in all these cases, we were in the case of super insulating materials. And this was quite surprising that our aerogel produced only with cellulose was below all the usual thermal insulating materials. So this is quite difficult to do it with pure cellulose. It would be very expensive. So we decided to try with another type of source, and that is chestnut wood logs. And we went just up to high pressure homogenization of the wood. So you see that it was possible to make emulsions, maybe not as nice as the pure cellulose, but still very nice emulsions. You can see that when we look at the emulsion on microscope, there are other things that than small particles, but wherever it works very nice. All the emulsions were very nice. And when we freeze dry, we still add some aerogels that are very nicely homogeneous, even if it's less than pure cellulose. Here it's just wood that has been blended. So you can see that the compressive modulus against the density was really interesting. The thermal conductivity is about 50 milliwatt, and it's a little bit decreasing with the density, but it keeps about the same. So we have a lightweight hierarchical architecture with density. We have a high specific surface area, about 600 meters square per gram, a very high porosity, a very low thermal conductivity. So it's not super insulating, but it's not bad. And excellent mechanical properties. So if you see, we are here, so not better than here, as was the previous sample, but in the same area as usual insulating materials. So this is one example of what we can do using these starting point as immersion. So we saw that we can play with the structure, and if you want to be able to produce exactly what you want, you have to play not only with structure, but with functionality, because cellulose has a lot of good properties, but not everything. So sometimes you're obliged to add some functionality concerning the application. So one way is to make hybrid particles. So we did it with TiO2, for example, for photocatalytic properties, with carbon nanotubes to make conductive materials, or silver for biocide properties. So these are three examples, but there are many in literature. You can just look. So I will just show you one example of what can be used for hybrid materials in the case of emulsions. And you see here that CNC here and TiO2 that is grafted on the surface allows to have particles with photocatalytic properties, but that are nicely dispersed in water, which is not the case of TiO2 alone. And when you mix this with oil and make an emulsion, you keep the same conditions as CNC, which means that you can have the stabilization of nice emulsions. But what is very funny in that case is that it becomes catalytic, so you can have photodegradation in both liquid, which means that you can have a protection of the aqueous part and at the oil part. So since you are at the interface and are completely covered, you have a fully photodegradable substrate that is completely in a liquid as a homogeneous phase. And also, since we saw that it was possible to freeze dry or to dry the different emulsions, then we tried to do it on a foam. And then we see that we keep also this photocatalytic property on foam. So the functionality transfer occurs in suspensions, emulsions, and aerogels. So the idea of this is that most of these properties appear on the surface of the particle. You don't need to have a fully TiO2 particle to have the photocatalytic property. You just need to have a surface that is effective, and using cellulose as a substrate, you can manage with any hybrid particles like this. So another way to modify the surface is to adsorb. So here is, for example, the idea of using tannic acid. So this was done with Francesco da Cierno. And so we used tannic acid alone, and you see that tannic acid alone doesn't make any emulsion. Here is a tannic acid molecule. And what we did is to add tannic acid on the surface of CNC and compare the emulsions. So you can see that When you make the emulsion, there is no difference. After 30 days, there is no difference. So here is a CNC alone in blue, and in red when it is covered with tannic acid. And to see if this emulsion is very stable or not, we centrifuged, and you can see that here the emulsion is preserved. It is deformed because centrifugation is not horizontal but bended, and you see that it keeps the deformation. And here are the characteristics of the emulsion, and they are really similar. And this is for different concentrations of particle. So you can wonder if you really have tannic acid. So we did some environmental SEM. So here is the CNC alone, and there is a very diffuse surface. So this is done in water, so you have no drying. This is why it is not very clear, because CNC is fully hydrophilic, and it is not a net surface. But when you have tannic acid on the surface, and we did it several times, then you can see the surface. So you really have a difference in the surface of the droplets. So what you can see that in sometimes you can change the surface of the particles and keep the properties of what you add, but then the properties of the emulsions are directed by the substrate, so by the CNC, the cellulose, but the properties are directed by what is on the surface on the CNC, which means here for tannic acid, antioxidant, antimicrobial properties, for example, or if you add other things, you can add extra properties. So another example, when you add methyl cellulose, so this is methyl cellulose, where H are substituted by CH3, so it's a little bit more hydrophobic. You mix CNC and methyl cellulose, then you have a colloidally stable suspension of CNC, and you build this hybrid CNC MC, and added with oil, you have Pickering emulsion once again. So there is a lot here to see. So you can see here from methyl cellulose itself that you can make, contrary to tannic acid, methyl cellulose itself make emulsions. But you can see here that it is in black, that there are not very nice emulsions. You can see here after centrifugation that they are not very stable, and you have very large diameters. But when you have CNC covered with methyl cellulose, then you recover very nice emulsions up to, it depends on the amount of methyl cellulose you want to put on, but they are all very nice. And you can see that you have similar properties, except when you add a lot of methyl cellulose, then you add extra properties to because you have free methyl cellulose. So this is another story again that you can play, having some particles and some molecules. So here you can see that for CNC alone and methyl cellulose alone, there is no apparent aggregation, but you can have when you have intermediate systems, different types of emulsions. So it works really very well, and you can play with the amount of both CNC and methyl cellulose. Here is another possibility, because it was a little bit hydrophobic. using methyl cellulose, but still it is a hydrophilic system. So going through a more hydrophobically modified CNC, we use the ethyl cellulose this time. And then you see with ethyl cellulose that you have to put it in ethanol because it is not soluble in water. And then through evaporation, you can make colloidally stable suspensions and then mix with hexadecane and try to make peak ring emulsions here again, but starting from hydrophobically modified particles. So here, in certain conditions, because you can see ethyl cellulose won't make any, there is no proof here, but you can't make an emulsion with ethyl cellulose. And here you had 5% of ethyl cellulose, 20 and 40% of ethyl cellulose. And you see that when you have a little, then you can make nice emulsions. When you have a lot, it's a bit messy. And you can see that the stability is very bad because you have a release of oil here after centrifugation. It is not very stable. But in certain conditions, you can have quite nice emulsions. And it was funny to see that you have a very raw surface for all these systems with a lot of, there are aggregations and cohesion between the droplets. So this is, once again, another way to have different kinds of emulsions. And what was very nice to see also is that when you prepare these particles, then you have, here was the contact angle with the ACD, so the ethyl cellulose or methyl cellulose concentration in the mixture. And then you can see in blue with CNC, and in red when you have tannic acid on the surface on the CNC. So here are the result for the methyl cellulose. So what was very nice to see is that we always had at very low amounts of methyl cellulose, very hydrophilic behavior. It means that the contact angle was decreasing, and we succeed to prepare super hydrophilic material and surface. Whereas when you have the tannic acid, there is no super hydrophilic materials. And when you had a bit too much, then it is more hydrophobic than it was at the beginning. And after, when you have a lot, there is no change anymore. But in that first part of methyl cellulose, you can really have a big story to make between 11 and 45 degree in contact angle. And if you want to go further in hydrophobic domain, then you use ethyl cellulose. And then here, there is no difference between CNC and CNC covered with tannic acid. You only increase the hydrophobic part of the particle, and you can see that you can play on a range of 57 degree, which is a lot, just with the stabilization and to get some particles that are easy to disperse in different solvents in water. So adsorption allows a large variation of contact angle, and all this is without chemistry. So this is the very nice part of this work, that it's only playing with the interactions. So you look at the cellulose, you play with interactions, you see what you want to put on the surface, and it is just by mixing without using any big solvents. So here is the end of my presentation. So what I wanted to show you today is that the interfacial properties of cellulose are highly versatile, that you can do a lot varying the structure. The biomass offers a large range of sourcing. So the idea to study cellulose is to see that in all biomass you have cellulose. So you can more or less adapt all what you see with cellulose to any biomass. So this is very ambitious, but a large way to play with all the sourcing. And also what we know, you already know, cellulose has great properties. I won't try to change that, but not all the properties. And so you can use cellulose still as a substrate to get some properties that cellulose doesn't have. And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you a lot, Isabelle, for a very nice presentation. We will now do like this, that we will open up for questions. And you can, if you're in the Zoom channel, you can raise your hand, or if you're on the YouTube, Per will have a look at you. But before...
there is no YouTube today, so
okay.
One thing less to keep track of.
Oh, okay, but then we raise up for open up for questions. But I can start with one. If you go back some slides, you talked about the CNC and methylcellulose. And the mechanism, I suppose, in that case is that here in the left-hand figure where you had stability, the next slide, I think it was, yeah, this one, that you have adsorption of the methylcellulose on the CNC. Is that, did I understood you correctly, that the MC cellulose adsorbs on the CNCs?
Yeah, methylcellulose adsorbs, yes, exactly.
Yeah. But when you took the ethyl cellulose, then I was not attending properly, because was that the ethyl cellulose, was that in particles? So you had a lot of particles, or the next?
It is the same thing, same process. Just the main difference is that methyl cellulose is hydrosoluble, whereas ethyl cellulose is not. So you have to go through ethanol to solubilize ethyl cellulose. But what we found, so I just showed here the part about emulsions, but we studied also how it adsorbs on the cellulose, and it is the same finally, because when ethyl cellulose is solubilized in ethanol, then it is well solubilized and no problem. But when you remove ethanols, it prefers adsorb on cellulose than aggregates itself. So you have a particle that is covered or by the CNC or by the ethyl cellulose. But when you prepare the emulsion, then it's a bit tricky. When you have a lot of ethyl cellulose, a large part will go in the oil part. Whereas when you have not so much, you keep the particle.
So did you consider to use the latex particles of ethyl cellulose? Because I know that these ethyl cellulose particles has also been used for forming emulsions.
Excuse me, can you repeat, please?
Ethyl cellulose, when I coming from the pharmaceutical industry, and there we use ethyl cellulose latex particles, so particles of ethyl cellulose in water suspensions. And I know that these particles has also been used to stabilize emulsions. So I just wonder if you had considered to use that particle-based ethyl cellulose as well, or not?
No. We are quite sure that at high amount of ethyl cellulose we have these particles. So there, it doesn't work that much, because when it is ethyl cellulose particles, it's themselves, it is less stable than compared to the particles when ethyl cellulose is on cellulose.
Okay.
And then when you use the hybrid particles, it works. But here you have a lot of ethyl cellulose particles, and it's not working that well. So we didn't do it with ethyl cellulose particles only. We should have done that, of course. But
it was just a question. But we have some more questions in the chat.
Yeah. So the question is, should we relay, or Susanna, do you want to ask and we have Jan as well? I guess if I press allow, Susanna, you should be able to ask your own question right now.
Yeah, okay. My question, thank you first for a good presentation. My question was regarding drying methods, what you would suggest. Is it spray drying or other? If you would want to dry these emulsions.
Yes, that can work also. We are working on this, but for the moment, it works. Yes, you can dry. You have to find a few things, because there are several results from a team in Canada using a usual process to dry, and they succeed to dry these emulsions.
Even without spray drying, then, I mean, some kind of other type of separation, or
no,
like on filter beds or something.
Freeze drying works perfectly, but drying only in an oven is not working. You destroy the emulsion.
We had a question from Jan, and
I will let him in. Jan, you should now be.
Otherwise, we may ask the question on behalf of Jan. Jan, or do you want to ask it by yourself, or should I take it? It is about the sonication, Isabelle, you have used. Do you have any information about the time and frequency and so you used for making the sonications? And I think it was in the beginning of the presentation you talked about sonication, wasn't it?
Yes, it depends on the volume. In fact, this is why I didn't precise, because if you have you can do it in an Eppendorf, then it's few seconds, and you can do 1 liter, then it's a few minutes. So you adapt amplitude and time to the volume of emulsion.
So when you design this frequency, I'm not sure exactly what John wanted to ask, so I try to continue to ask here. So when you design your experiment, do you make a kind of experimental design to figure out which frequency and amplitude you should use, or what is the approach you do when you try to design them?
In fact, you can see the emulsion, so you see if it is correctly homogenized, and after you see when you let it stabilize, if it's correct, if all the oil is encapsulated, and once everything is encapsulated, it's okay. I must say that I had at the beginning my own protocol that I gave to the different students, and I realized nearly all times that was quite systematic, that they all changed, and they made their own protocols for any reason. They were all right, but I don't dare to say any unique protocol because everybody is making its own and it works.
It's good that you have innovative students. Yeah.
I just to add a comment from John who asked the question. He asked because he has CNCs to stabilize to reduce graphene oxide in water.
And this is another question. It's not the oil, it's graphene oxide. But it might work, but he has to try. It depends on the sourcing, it depends on the size, it depends on many things.
So I have a number of questions, so if I may, I can combine two in a way. I'm very amazed by these tiny, the smallest emulsion particles that were through the homoionizer. And I've seen this before, and as you show, it seems like the CNCs are wrapping around the tiny droplets. But there aren't too many. Have you thought anything of how that is enough to actually stabilize? You had one image, yes, like this one. There seems like there are two CNCs on the entire droplet. Or are there smaller things there as well? Or
no, usually there are more like these, but for the smallest one, there are very few.
Yeah,
so,
and what is the mechanism making it stable? And when it's such a little fraction of the area is covered?
Because in my opinion, it is these one are really very small, and you know, when they are that size, it is a nano emulsion, so the probability to see the others is decreasing. And with the negative repulsion, and it works. That's we saw.
Yeah, obviously it works. It's just amazing that it does.
yeah. Because we mainly saw like this coverage, like this, which was for me already very few. But this is enough, and it is moving. And there is a very nice work from a team in Bordeaux, in France, who showed that the particles were moving on the surface, and they could stabilize emulsions with only, I think it's less than 20% of surface covered, because it is moving, and finally it was working, whereas it was more or less like this. And they have been studying this, and you don't need so much to stabilize when it is small.
Because you don't suspect there is something else on the surface as well, from the sonication that you have sulfonated cellulose or something, that because these are sulfuric acid derived CNCs, or
yeah.
And linked to that, we always teach that CNCs are super stiff. They are crystals and they are very stiff. They seem to bend. Have you calculated, since you know the surface energy of both surfaces, does it make sense that it bend from that interaction?
This is why we found that, and we were very happy to see this publication. And it is work from Karim Mazo, and he tried to bend, so by simulation, a crystal according to the different crystal phase planes. And then he showed that according to the 200 plan, so the most hydrophobic one, he was able to go up to 60 degree bending angle without breaking, which was in the elastic domain. So yes, they can bend, but according to only one plan.
But what force is required to bend a CNC like this? I mean, you can back calculate. Can you use this to calculate the modulus of the crystals? Since we know since we know the surface chemistry of the droplet and the CNC, that should give you the interaction between the two, and if that force is well, obviously they bend, but yeah, that should give a number of the bending stiffness, right?
I would love to if you can help, but it's not easy to follow experimentally. Some people asked me to do it experimentally. Yeah, I can't do that. I can just take the image and then calculate after, but I don't know how to do that correctly. Because they are changing in length. It is so polydispersed and difficult that I didn't know how to do that.
But some rough calculations, I think that should be doable, and then simply see that the force is enough, or if it's CNCs that have defects that can bend and the other ones not, or yeah. I'm still amazed that this happens.
Yeah. We thought, I expected a kind of nest on the surface. And the first image like this was completely amazing for me. Yeah, okay, they are bending. How can that? Even to have some, I was convinced that the particles were removed, but up to the moment I could see that they were on the surface and bent. But capillary force is huge. So this capillary force is sufficient, is enough to bend them. So the main thing was for me, why don't they break? And they don't break because they are aligned according to a specific plan.
Yeah.
Do we have more questions in the audience?
I don't see any more questions in the audience. So
it's time, whatever.
I can have a final one then, if you don't have to answer because you probably thought of this. So from a fiber context, we want to replace petroleum-based plastics basically. And you had the thermal insulation properties, compared it to polystyrene foams and so on. And I guess that links to the first question you received as well. If you want to arbitrarily form this into a desired function, about scalability, I mean, can we avoid freeze drying from these emulsions to actually make, in an efficient way, a large object that, for example, replace highly porous polystyrene foams?
Yeah, indeed. Freeze drying is not upgradable, definitely. And we are working on it. So hopefully next time I will explain you how to do it.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you a lot for the presentation. I think we should say thank you to the audience, and especially, of course, to you for taking your time and giving us this inspiration lecture. So a lot thanks to you.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No.